In this video, I'm going to cover Germany's role in the First World War, which, unlike the second one, isn't so controversial. As always, let's start with some brief context. A while back, thanks to the brilliant tactics of Otto von Bismarck, the fragmented German states were unified in 1871, and this new German state surpassed France as a dominant European land power. The Prussian king became the Emperor of Germany, and the Prussian aristocracy enjoyed dominant positions in politics, military, and society. By the turn of the century, Germany had undergone rapid industrialization, and Germany soon became the leading industrial nation in Europe. But of course, when you get a lot of workers coming into the cities, there's going to be some huge social changes. The trade union movement started to flourish, and the Social Democratic Party of Germany, the SPD, emerged, representing the political views of the German working class. In the Reichstag elections of 1912, the Socialists became the largest party in the Reichstag, as 1 in every 3 Germans voted for them. So Kaiser Wilhelm II comes to power in 1888. Some interesting facts about the Kaiser: he was born with a withered left arm, he was very erratic and frequently changed his mind, and he was also cousins with the soon-to-be Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and King George V of England, and one day he'd be going to war with both of them. Anyway, despite Germany having a democratically elected body called the Reichstag, the real power lied with the Prussian aristocracy and the Chancellor. Wilhelm did not have much affinity towards parliamentary democracy and frequently removed the Chancellor if he did not agree with them, and one day that might bite him in the back. Okay, so we've covered what was happening in Germany. We now have to look at what was happening outside of Germany. These were the days of full guns blazing imperialism, and most of the European powers looked to the rest of the world and said, it's free real estate. Germany joined quite late to the imperial race, but they adopted a foreign policy of Weltpolitik to transform Germany into a truly global power. Germany were able to build up a mini-colonial empire from territories in Africa, China, and the Pacific Ocean, and they also started to throw their weight around in other colonial affairs, such as supporting the Boers in South Africa against the British, or promoting Moroccan sovereignty against the French, which, as you can imagine, did not go down well with the British or the French. There was also the beginning of some sort of Anglo-German rivalry, as they both engaged in a massive naval arms race. The British, being an island, of course liked their boats and had the strongest navy in the world at the time, whilst the Kaiser believed that Germany's future laid in the oceans and that a strong fleet was a sign of imperial greatness. The British, at all costs, was determined to preserve her naval supremacy. After Britain launched their absolutely massive battleship, the HMS Dreadnought, in 1906, this ushered in a new naval arms race and rivalry between Britain and Germany. However, Britain was not the main threat to Germany. Their main threats lied to Germany's borders. To the west you have Germany's traditional enemy France, and to the east you have Tsarist Russia. To the south they had Austria-Hungary, but they were on good terms and had been closely allied for a while now. In response to this threat and mutual strategic interest between France and Russia, these two powers came together in the Franco-Russian alliance of 1891, and Britain later joined this alliance in 1907 to become the Triple Entente powers. Germany essentially believed that there was a ring of encirclement around their borders, and the threat of a two-front war for Germany became a real danger. That's where a guy called Alfred von Schlieffen comes in. In 1906, he created a military plan in the event that Germany goes to war with Russia and France. The Schlieffen plan was designed to fight a defensive war against Russia and at the same time deploy a massive offensive to take out France by invading through neutral Netherlands and Belgium. This was their blueprint for victory during the First World War. Okay, so with these network of alliances in Europe, a lot of influential figures saw a massive war as inevitable sooner or later. There was a mini-crisis in the Balkans in 1912, which served as a prelude to the First World War. After this, all the major powers started a process of rearmament and massive propaganda campaigns, and for the next 18 months, tensions in Europe rose dramatically. Then June 1914 rolls around, and the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was taking a lovely drive through Sarajevo when his driver takes the wrong turn, and the Archduke got shot by a Bosnian Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip. For the next month, there was a huge diplomatic crisis. Berlin declared her full support to Austria-Hungary and urged them to go to war with Serbia. Vienna then sent an ultimatum to Serbia, so severe that it was certain to be rejected, and served as a pretense for military action. They thought that Russian intervention over Serbia was unlikely. Well, they were wrong, and Russia started to mobilize its forces. On the 1st of August 1914, Germany declared war on Russia, and on the 3rd of August, Germany also declared war on France. The announcement of war was met with nationwide enthusiasm and patriotism. The leaders described Germany as the victim of unprovoked aggression, and hundreds of thousands of young men volunteered for the army, who believed that victory would be achieved within a few weeks. The Schlieffen Plan was put into action, and the German army swept through Belgium and into France, with the aim of quickly taking Paris and winning the war. On the Eastern Front, Germany won a huge victory at the Battle of Tannenberg against the Russians and made the two generals Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff very popular heroes in Germany. Things were going well originally, but the Battle of the Marne brought the German forces to a grinding halt and culminated in a 4-year-long stalemate of trench warfare on the Western Front. As the Schlieffen Plan failed, Germany now faced a prolonged two-front war that they wanted to avoid from the outset. By the end of 1914, hundreds of thousands of young Germans had died. Nevertheless, going into 1915, most Germans had confidence that they'd win this war. Things started going south in 1916, when Germany faced enormous losses and hundreds of thousands of men at the Battle of Verdun and the Battle of the Somme. To make matters worse, Germany's main allies, Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, really weren't pulling their weight. Things looked bleak, and in August 1916, Hindenburg became the chief of the General Staff, with Ludendorff by his side. Anytime the government proposed policies which they didn't like, they would simply threaten to resign, and so they always got their way in the end. And so, basically, for the next 2 years of the war, Germany pretty much became a military dictatorship, with General Hindenburg and Ludendorff at the wheel. On the home front, living standards also started to fall dramatically. This was a modern war, and to win it, it did not just require the mobilization of soldiers and superior manpower, but needed the mobilization of the entire economy. Incomes dropped and inflation increased rapidly. At the same time, there were industrialists that were heavily profiting from the war. The decline in living standards and the increases in inequality were weighing down the patience of the people. The British naval blockade of Germany made things even worse, as hundreds of thousands of civilians died from starvation, and malnutrition and disease was commonplace amongst the German population. The fall in living standards in the second half of the war was causing unrest amongst the working class, who were hit the worst. When the Russian Tsar Nicholas was overthrown in the February Revolution, there was a major fear that something similar could happen in Germany. So in the Easter message of April 1917, Kaiser Wilhelm announced that the German government would undergo constitutional reforms after the war was over. Anyway, back to the war. So in early 1917, the German position in the West looked bleak, and in a desperate gamble they turned to their secret weapon, unrestricted submarine warfare, to break the naval blockade and win the war. Unrestricted submarine warfare was basically a type of naval warfare in which German U-boats would sink any ships, including civilian and merchant ones, without any warning. Obviously, this was quite controversial, and Germany had tried this before in 1915 and sunk their RMS Lusitania, killing nearly 1,200 civilians, and nearly brought the USA into the war. But after a stern warning from America, Germany agreed that they wouldn't do this again. But by February 1917, the sheer hopelessness of the German position in the West led them to resume unrestricted submarine warfare, and knowing that this would likely lead to US entry into the war, Germany sent the Zimmermann telegram proposing a military alliance with Mexico. The idea was that Mexico would attack the USA from the south and gain some territory for themselves, and this distraction would slow down US shipments of munitions, supplies and troops to Europe. The telegram was intercepted by British intelligence, and it was unsure whether this was real or not, but Arthur Zimmermann publicly admitted it, and America declared war on Germany in April 1917. It would still take over a year for America to actually mobilize a large army in Europe, and in the meantime, things looked good on the Eastern Front, as Germany's pet project of sending a bunch of Bolsheviks to Russia really paid off, as Vladimir Lenin took power in the October Revolution and immediately pulled Russia out of the war. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed between the Soviet Russia and the Central Powers in March 1918, and it was absolutely brutal on Russia, as they lost control of Ukraine, Poland, Belarus, the Baltic states and the Caucasus. It was designed to destroy Russia as a great power, and should ensure German hegemony in the East in these newly liberated states who feared and mistrusted Russia. With the threat of a two-front war gone, Germany shifted 52 divisions westwards, and by March 1918, 3.5 million troops were poised for an attack on the Western Front to end the war. In the spring offensive of 1918, the German army made its deepest advances in the Western Front since the beginning of the war, and was met with initial success, as they reached only 40 miles from Paris. But they did suffer heavy losses, and by July 1918, the arrival of fresh American troops gave the Allies the numerical advantage, and they launched the 100 Days Offensive and pushed the German army back. When the already exhausted German soldiers saw waves and waves of fresh American troops coming to the front, it was a pretty big blow for them, and soon the German army started to collapse and led to the armistice on the 11th of November 1918, finally ending the First World War. Whilst the German people realised that the final offensive had probably failed, the announcement that Germany wanted an armistice came as a sudden shock to them. After all, unlike World War II, foreign troops never actually entered German soil in the First World War. In the aftermath, it was estimated that there were around 2 million German casualties from the First World War, and not to mention the psychological effects of trench warfare. But we're not done just yet. As you can imagine, Kaiser Wilhelm's government was incredibly unpopular at this point. In the last few weeks of the First World War, strikes and mutinies were spreading across cities in Germany. Soon, Wilhelm's military advisors told the Kaiser that they could no longer support him, and on the 9th of November 1918, the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm was announced. Wilhelm fled the country and lived the rest of his life in the Netherlands, hoping that one day, the monarchy in Germany would be restored. Power was shifted towards civilian government and parliamentary democracy in Germany, marking the first stage of the German Revolution. It was a bloodless revolution, and the military leaders were quite clever here, because they knew that by transferring power to civilian government, they could avoid some blame for losing the war, and these political parties would have to negotiate the surrender to the Allies, which was always going to be unpopular. The myth of the November criminals was given to the German politicians who sabotaged the war effort by seeking an armistice and later signing the shameful Versailles Settlement, but more of that to come in the next video. That's where I'll end off, and if you gained value from this video, I'd be so grateful if you press that subscribe button. The next part is going to cover the Weimar Republic and the rise of someone who I wish got into art school. See you then.